Chapter 372. Wang Ling naturally had his own reasons for wanting such a large amount of holy beast blood. Because in some sense, Loopy Toad's current drowsiness had a lot to do with cultivating the revised Demon King Heart Sutra. Although Wang Ling didn't know if this could be considered a side effect, this kind of drowsiness wasn't a good thing. Because once Loopy Toad fell asleep like this, it would be as if it were dead, and wouldn't be able to feel anything for a period of time. The blood of holy beasts, as recorded in ancient texts, had a miraculous effect on treating this condition. As long as Loopy Toad was soaked in the blood, it would be able to alleviate this special drowsiness. But there was one thing that made Wang Ling a little unhappy. He had actually spent 20 packets of crispy noodle snacks on this holy beast blood. This was too much of a loss. While Loopy Toad was sleeping, Wang Ling had wanted to review his homework, but he suddenly heard Father Wang's call from the first floor. When he went downstairs, he saw that Mother Wang had actually fallen asleep on the table, and Father Wang was taking off her apron. She had been busy all day today, and in the evening, she and the old man had prepared such a large table of dishes, which was a huge drain on her spirit. Father Wang carefully pulled off Mother Wang's apron and carried her in a princess carry. He then looked at Wang Ling and said in a low voice, "Send us up." Wang Ling nodded, put his hand on Father Wang's shoulder, and directly sent them to the bedroom on the 3rd floor. A human self-propelled elevator was just that awesome. On the side, the old man couldn't help exclaiming, "This ability, it's really convenient." "Grandpa, aren't you tired?" Wang Ling tilted his head and asked the old man telepathically. "It's fine, it's your mom who's tired herself out today. She bought so much food and she carried it all to the car on her own. In the end, I'm still getting old." The old man sighed. "Back then at Kikaro restaurant, I did all of it on my own, from selecting the ingredients, loading and unloading the goods, then moving them to the back kitchen and processing them into food. Now I can't do it without help." As he spoke, the old man's eyes were fixed on the TV screen. Wang Ling heard a male live broadcaster's loud and clear voice on the TV, "Chasing breasts in white night?" Starting immediately. It turned out that the old man was watching Chasing Breasts at White Night. This was a popular TV series recently. It was about a pair of twin brothers searching for their mother. The two brothers' mother had passed away when they were very young, and the two brothers had very limited impressions of their mother. They only vaguely remembered that when their mother was breastfeeding when they were young, there was a plum blossom mark on her chest. So one day, after the two brothers obtained clues about their mother in a certain city, they chased after her day and night. One moved during the day while the other moved at night. They used all kinds of methods to find their mother. Later, after the two brothers found their mother, they worked together to write a guide for single dogs, called 100 Ways to Undress. The old man had been waiting in front of the TV for a long time. He couldn't help but say, "The broadcasting time of the TV stations nowadays is not punctual at all. The commercials are also very repetitive. One commercial can be played 3 times in a row." As soon as the old man said that, another advertisement played on the TV. The old man hurriedly clicked his tongue. "Why is it the Society of Saints again? I've watched this advertisement on TV more than 30 times recently." Society of Saints? Wang Ling felt that the name was a little familiar. It seemed that he had heard someone mention it when he came home from school recently. There seemed to be an advertisement for the Society of Saints on the side of the road. Following the advertisement on the TV, Wang Ling took a quick look at the introduction of the Society of Saints. In the advertisement, a member of the Society of Saints was having a tug-of-war with a group of grade 3 students from a foundation establishment high school. No matter how hard the students tried, the member of the Society of Saints was as firm as a rock and wouldn't budge even half a step. Then, the member of the Society of Saints just gave a gentle tug and easily won. Finally, the advertisement directly revealed the member's information. This was a grade 1 freshman from Building Materials High Xuanhuan. Age, 16, realm, Peak Late Foundation Establishment. Wang Ling's eyes twitched fiercely at this news. A grade 1 freshman at Peak Late Foundation Establishment had actually won a tug-of-war with 10 grade 3 students who were also at Peak Late Foundation Establishment? Wang Ling didn't think this was a fake advertisement. Nowadays, the crackdown on fake advertisements on TV was very strict. Furthermore, after the Shuego sect incident, there wouldn't be any fraudulent organizations that would dare go against the wind and court death. Generally speaking, organizations that could advertise on TV were mostly light forces recognized by the state. After watching the advertisement, Wang Ling had initially thought that this Society of Saints was a private education organization. But the white line at the end of the advertisement completely changed Wang Ling's mind. It read in white, "The Society of Saints is officially open. Talents from all schools across the country are welcome to join. In other words, this Society of Saints wasn't a private education organization, but an organization of talents from all over the country. Its purpose was to recruit talented people from all schools for specialized training. The spokesperson xuanhuan in the video advertisement was incredibly strong, and clearly met the Society of Saints standards. According to the normal standards of the modern cultivation system, the limit of a peak late foundation establishment cultivator's strength was usually around 2000 gene. But Wang Ling had always felt that there might still be some people with extraordinary talent in this world. And this advertisement from the Society of Saints indeed confirmed Wang Ling's thoughts. It seemed that there were indeed other talented people and amazing things in this world. It was July 5th on Wednesday in the 11th week of the semester. This morning, Grade 1, Class 3 had finally resumed its usual liveliness. Super Chin, Dopey Gua, Little Peanut and the others were already at school. Although their spirits were still sealed and they couldn't use their spirit energy, Teacher Pan felt that their studies couldn't be delayed. So last night, Teacher Pan had spared no effort to call the parents one by one to motivate them for the midterm exam. Thus, it was all thanks to her that all the students in Grade 1 Class 3 could be present today. The students in the other classes who also had their spirits sealed were still resting at home and wouldn't be here until next week. After about 10 minutes or so, Teacher Pan came to the classroom. Seeing that everyone was present today, she nodded with great satisfaction. Standing on the dais, Teacher Pan gave a harmless smile. Wow! Why is it that all the students in our class are so cute today? Some students actually took the initiative to come to school to study even though their bodies need to be nursed back to health. As your teacher, I'm really touched. It wouldn't have mattered if she hadn't said this, but as soon as she did, Wang Ling could already feel the class brimming with resentment. Teacher Pan looked around and smiled slightly as she pulled out a stack of test papers from somewhere. Since the cute students like to study so much, why don't we do 2 sets of questions first? Chapter 373. Just like that, the whole class was tormented by Teacher Pan for an entire morning self-study session plus the first 2 classes. When the Tao Talismans class was over, everyone was astonished to find that they had actually done 3 sets of test papers on average, but that wasn't the most astonishing thing. The scariest thing was that Teacher Pan had already marked 2 sets of test papers in class, and was now busy recording the results in the office. Dopey Guo was usually pretty popular outside classes. Of course, this was all because he usually gossiped. The most exaggerated thing was that he actually had his own fan club at number 60 high school. As soon as they heard that Master of Dopey had returned to school, all his Dopey fans rushed over almost as soon as class ended to ask about his injuries. In fact, this guy hadn't been injured at all. If you really had to find a reason, it would be that the heavenly material sword had made a very small cut on the back of the hand or arm of the student whose spirit had been sealed. And this kind of cut was completely negligible as long as medicine was applied. To be precise, the spirit sealing wasn't an injury but a state of mind. Wang Ling sat at a table at the very back of the classroom and watched the show with Super Chin. Because his table was right next to Dopey Gua's, it was now heavily surrounded and occupied by people. It actually didn't feel good to be sandwiched in the middle, and Wang Ling hated this feeling, so he simply stayed a little further away and watched the show with Super Chin. How's your body now? How does it feel to have your spirit sealed? Someone asked. Dopey Gua closed his eyes and pondered for a bit, then immediately replied. It's probably my first time having my spirit sealed and I feel a little weak. Then how does it feel? Do you know what it feels like to play mahjong with 4 pissing beef meatballs stuck in a Russian nesting doll? Wang Ling didn't quite understand the familiar description, but the upgraded version of the answer made him feel awesome. Seeing the pained expressions on everyone's faces, Dopey Gua couldn't help laughing. I'm joking, it's actually not that serious. It just feels like I've suddenly been deprived of spirit energy. I'm just like an ordinary person now and I'm not used to it. I can't even walk up the stairs. Actually, from the fact that his spirit had been sealed, it could already reflect the difference in physical quality between a foundation establishment cultivator and an ordinary person. In terms of cultivation talent, Wang Ling felt that Dopey Gua was actually pretty average. Although he was in the elite class, he couldn't be said to be too strong, and could just barely be considered average among the foundation establishment students in the city. In the last 2 years, no. 60 High had been preparing to be upgraded to a key city high school, and the selection of new senior grade 1 students had been much stricter than before. Hence, this batch of number 60 high school freshmen wasn't the worst, as Teacher Pan had said. In terms of cultivation talent alone, they were much better than any previous batch. Many of them were at the peak late foundation establishment stage as soon as they entered, such as Lotus Sun and Super Chin. For the school, as long as these elite students had enough resources, it was very likely that they would successfully advance to the golden core stage before graduation. The current foundation establishment stage was no longer the same as before. As long as one's talent was good, coupled with enough resources, it was completely possible to advance to the gold core stage in a few years. But it was impossible to advance any further. For example, modern cultivation resources were far from enough to advance from the golden core stage to the nascent soul stage, and a lot of time was needed to comprehend the great Tao. Therefore, for number 60 high school, Wang Ling's batch of senior grade 1 students had the highest hope of increasing number 60 high school's golden core conversion rate, as well as helping number 60 high school directly advance to a key city high school. Although some teachers usually had sharp tongues, none of the teachers in the school dared to deny this. On the surface, they criticized their own students for all sorts of faults, but in private, the teachers would vigorously compare themselves to their students. How awesome their students were, how many test scores their students got. When all was said and done, they were the students they had taught themselves. No matter how many flaws they had, even if they had one shining point, the teachers could privately magnify it infinitely. There were still 5 minutes before class started. Someone asked Dopey Gua, "Is there any new gossip recently?" Dopey Gua replied without hesitation, "Of course it's about the newest Society of Saints." Realization dawned on everyone's faces. It was very obvious that everyone had seen this reaction in private, and had even paid special attention to the Society of Saints advertisement. Dopey Gua smiled. This Society of Saints is quite new. It's not a private education organization, but a state-certified organization that gathers elite students from all over the world. To put it in a more understandable way, this Society of Saints is an elite class set up by the state, and recruits elites from all over the country from schools. Of course, those who can join the Society of Saints are the cream of the crop, and they're definitely gifted. I see. Everyone nodded, not understanding what he meant. The image of the spokesperson Xuanhuan defeating 10 people of the same realm in a tug-of-war was still vivid in their minds. Someone asked, "Then after joining the Society of Saints, are you considered a member of the school or the Society of Saints?" Dopey Gua, "It's like this. Joining the Society of Saints is equivalent to being a member of the Society of Saints. During the 3 years of high school, you'll receive specialized learning and combat training at the Society of Saints school base. In addition to receiving a large amount of resources from the Society of Saints every week, you can also receive one-on-one guidance from a famous teacher. But when it comes time for the college entrance examination, you'll still take it as a student from your previous school, and your scores will also be considered the school's." "Is this a collaboration with all the high schools in the country?" someone asked. Dopey Gua nodded. "You can think of it that way, but it's not that easy to join the Society of Saints. They only accept first-year freshmen, and once they like you, they'll send someone to the school to negotiate and then go through the signing process. Of course, you can also pay a sum of money to take the exam at the Society of Saints, but you probably won't pass. Then, how much does it cost?" 5,000 immortal gold bars. F***CK. So expensive? Someone exclaimed. "What if you don't pass? Then the money will go down the drain." Dopey Gua shrugged. "But as far as I know, rich parents nowadays all want to send their children there. I heard that if you can rank in the top 20 in the Society of Saints, you can get a recommendation. You don't have to take the college entrance examination, and there's no requirement to reach the golden core stage. You can go to any university you want." For a moment, everyone was in an uproar. Who on earth was running this Society of Saints? Was it that powerful? Someone expressed doubt. "Who told you all this information? Is he reliable?" Dopey Gua smiled again. "Don't worry, I'm definitely reliable. One of my uncles in the Society of Saints told me." Everyone, Wang Ling. That night, Dopey Gua returned home. Dopey Gua stared at his mother. "Mom, am I your biological son?" Gua's mother, "Of course." Dopey Gua, "Then I want to take part in the Society of Saints test." Gua's mother smiled. "That winter, it snowed very heavily. On our way home, your father and I heard some noises from the trash cans on the street." Dopey Gua, "Mom, it's actually not expensive. It's only 5,000 immortal gold bars." Gua's mom, "Your dad and I walked over to take a look and we found, it was a dog." Dopey Gua, "Mom? I'm not taking the test anymore." Chapter 374. As Dopey Gua had said, the Society of Saints really wasn't a place that just anyone could join. Logically speaking, as Shanghai City's general administration of 100 schools, as well as a cadre at that, it was impossible for Audiobooks not to know about this. If the Society of Saints was up to something, he would be the first person in Shanghai City to be notified. But this Society of Saints didn't play by the rules. The entire organization's existence had actually been classified as a state secret at the beginning, and was directly managed by the Alliance of 10,000 Schools. Furthermore, it had already been operating in a small place for some time, and it was only in the last 2 days that it was announced to the public. Audiobook had only received the news when the Society of Saints advertisement had appeared on TV. Of course, the most tempting thing about the Society of Saints was the legendary guaranteed entry. There was no golden core restriction. As long as you were talented enough and ranked in the Society of Saints, you could go to any university you wanted. For example, 7 Stars Sect, a sect with a comprehensive cutoff score of 200,000, was a university holy land that many people would never be able to reach in their lifetimes. If you could enter the Society of Saints, then everything was possible. So here was the question: how would you know if you were talented in the eyes of the Society of Saints? This was a question worth thinking about. Wang Ling had seen an online post where someone had specially dug up information about the student Xuanhuan who had appeared in the Society of Saints TV advertisement. Building Materials High was a high school that Lin Xiaozong's father, Lin Xikong, had invested in and built, and this Xuanhuan was in fact directly related to Lin Xiaozong. Originally, Xuanhuan had just been Lin Xiaozong's follower. A while ago, Lin Xiaozong had been walking on the road when he had been blocked by several senior students in a corner, and Xuanhuan's potential had suddenly burst out. According to the post, at that time, several men in black had descended from the sky and directly taken Xuanhuan away. These men in black were cadre of the Society of Saints scattered all over the country, and were specifically responsible for selecting talented students. According to the informant in the post, this group of men in black should have been following Lin Xiaozong, but in the end they had an unintentional result, and happened to pick up Lin Xiaozong's leftover goods. And regarding this matter, Wang Ling was purely taking the attitude of a melon citizen. Whether the outside world made the Society of Saints sound so amazing or how many people wanted to sign up, it didn't matter to Wang Ling. Right now, Wang Ling's top priority was to deal with the district sports meet and midterm exams, as well as the 20 packets of crispy noodle snacks that he was about to lose. Everything else was secondary to him. No matter how powerful the Society of Saints was, it had nothing to do with him, as long as it didn't come back to him. But Wang Ling felt that the chances of the Society of Saints finding him were actually very low. His grades in number 60 high were neither high nor low, so why would they target him? Thinking this, he simply put the matter to the back of his mind. Review. This was much more important than the Society of Saints. One had to know that he had to average scores in his exams. If he did too well, Father Wang would scold him, and if he did too poorly, Teacher Pan would call his parents. Thus, Wang Ling felt that those who could get the average score in every exam were the real big shots. But not long after he opened the textbook, he received a text message from grenade-throwing senior Immortal. "Brother Ling, there's something I need to tell you," Wang Ling replied with a question mark. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal. "Well, about the holy beast blood, I might have to wait a day." Wang Ling was about to ask why when grenade-throwing senior Immortal replied with another text message. "I prepared a basin for little Silver today," and he was about to let the blood out. In the end, he said something about holy beast blood having to be let out under the midday sun, so he took the basin and knife outside to let it out. Seeing this, Wang Ling seemed to have already predicted the outcome. Sure enough, the second half of the text message read, "Then the residents nearby saw little Silver slit his wrist and let out the blood. He's now in the detention center, and the police are trying to persuade him." Wang Ling. 7 o'clock in the evening, Shanghai City's Anning District Cultivation Police Station. Little Silver was facing a police officer. His right wrist had already been disinfected and bandaged simply. When it had been discovered that he had slit his wrist, Little Silver's holy beast blood had already accumulated to fill half a basin. In the end, the police officers had poured it all out without saying anything. Recalling that scene now, Little Silver still felt a deep pain in his balls. Fortunately, holy beasts didn't rely on their livers to produce blood, otherwise he would have died of exhaustion. Name: Little Silver. "I'm asking for your real name. My name is Little Silver." The young man took out his ID card, which grenade-throwing senior Immortal had personally taken him to apply for not long ago. "Does it still hurt?" The police little brother in charge of taking the statement asked with concern. This little brother had worked as a psychiatrist before, and was usually the one in charge of this type of attempted suicide. Actually, taking the statement was secondary. The most important thing was psychological counseling. These young people who had attempted suicide had to open their hearts and feel the warmth of the world. It doesn't hurt anymore, Little Silver replied in a low voice, and at the same time looked at the bandage on his wrist with some disdain. As long as he wanted to, this small cut could completely heal in a few seconds. On the way to the police station, in order not to give himself away, he had watched the police bandage his wound before activating the healing mechanism, and there had been a lot of blood during the bandage. When can I leave? Little Silver raised his head and stared at the police officer with flickering eyes. However, the police little brother didn't fall for it at all. There's no point in acting cute. You have to explain clearly why you wanted to kill yourself. Little Silver muttered in a low voice, his expression a little resentful. It's all because of those 20 packets of crispy noodle snacks. Hearing this, the police little brother almost threw his pen away on the spot. What did you say? Little Silver, I mean because I didn't get the card I wanted out of the 20 packets of crispy noodle snacks, so... The police little brother continued to be astonished. Just because of that? That's why you thought of suicide. Little Silver, what else? The police little brother. About an hour later, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal arrived at the police station. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, hello, I'm here to bail someone out. In front of the reception desk, a police officer looked at him with a smile. Who are you bailing out? Give me a name. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, Little Silver. Oh, that young man who looks like he's a mixed blood. He was indeed at our police station because of an attempted suicide before, the police officer said. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, what about now? Police officer, go to the psychiatry department in the independent ward of 2nd Hospital. Chapter 375. After seeing Little Silver's miserable experience, Wang Ling was speechless for a long time. When all was said and done, a holy beast was still too honest. It would be strange if no one noticed such a strange action of cutting one's wrist and letting out blood in broad daylight. If Loopy Toad could cast an invisibility spell or set up a barrier, things wouldn't be so troublesome. It looked like the matter of the holy beast's blood would be delayed for 2 days because of this accident. Wang Ling sighed in his heart, but he actually wasn't in a hurry. Loopy Toad's soul was actually still in a long period of adaptation to its current body. Apart from cultivating the new version of the Demon King Heart Sutra, symptoms like lethargy were a sign that the body was still adapting to the new body. The holy beast's blood was like a catalyst that could greatly shorten the time it took for the body and soul to adapt. This wasn't a situation unique to Loopy Toad. When a soul entered a new body, it would definitely go through a long period of adjustment, which was unavoidable for everyone. For example, the old devil who had borrowed the body of the master of Shadow Stream, or the delivery little brothers who had suffered at the hands of the old devil back then. Although insurance companies had already successively created brand new lotus root bodies for these little brothers, it wasn't easy for them to truly adapt. For these delivery little brothers, even simple actions like shaking hands and hugging had to be done very carefully at the very beginning. Lotus root bodies were especially brittle before they got used to it, and if they weren't careful they could break their arms and pull out a bunch of lotus roots. Just thinking about it was frightening. It was already past 8 o'clock in the evening. Wang Ling revised for a while, then couldn't help taking out his wristwatch. Nowadays all kinds of electronic products were really quite sinful. People couldn't control their hands and always wanted to take them out for a look. In the morning the Society of Saints incident hadn't completely blown up, and had only spread widely in school. At this point in time Wang Ling was surprised to find that this Society of Saints was already trending. All the major news media, even the space and the special trending topics at the top of the list were related to Society of Saints. But Wang Ling didn't click on it and instead chose to ignore it. Then he opened the class group chat, and unsurprisingly found that it had also fallen into the hands of the students. Discussions about this Society of Saints were getting more and more enthusiastic, as if everyone was gifted and could be signed by the Society of Saints at any moment. After all, the temptation of a guaranteed spot was really too great. After graduating from high school, if he could successfully enter the university he wanted to go to, his life would be more than half complete. As mentioned before, in modern cultivation, the cultivation time between the building foundation stage and the golden core stage was extremely short. As long as one was talented enough and had enough resources, a breakthrough in a few years was not a problem at all. However, advancing from Jindan to Yuanying was different. At this time, a very good life mentor was needed, and this kind of opportunity could only be encountered in those famous universities. Of course, Wang Ling felt that none of this had anything to do with him. While Wang Ling was browsing online, Teacher Yi suddenly sent him a private message. Classmate Wang Ling, this is the competition form for the Battle of Soul Pets. When you have time, fill it out and send it to me. There are templates in the competition form, and these are spirit beasts that have already been selected by other schools. You can take a closer look at them. Then Teacher Yi directly sent him the spreadsheet. Oh, that's right, student Wang Ling. All the spirit beasts participating in the battle of spiritual pets need a certificate of their aptitude. When you come to school later, just give me a copy. To be honest, if it wasn't for Teacher Ye's physique, Wang Ling would have completely forgotten about this. Until now, Loopy Toad hadn't had its aptitude assessed by a proper organization. But it sounded troublesome. Loopy Toad could just take the test itself later. After that, Wang Ling opened the spreadsheet and directly flipped to the last few pages of the templates. This was the competition form for the Battle of Soul Pets event in the district sports meet between number 59 High School and Reliance High School. Both schools had already selected spirit beasts suitable for the battle. This time, the spirit beasts of both schools were provided by their own students. Number 59 High School would be sending out a combat spirit beast called Jinbei. Its owner was the famous delinquent He Buffing, who was currently in the process of turning over a new leaf. The information on Jinbei on the form was quite comprehensive. Name, Jinbei. Age, 300. Rank, Level 4 Spirit Beast Species, Goldenback Gorilla. Personality, docile, kind and pleasant. Hobby, banana. Special characteristics. When it sees bananas, it will go on a rampage. After looking through the information, Wang Ling noticed that there was a photo of Jinbei in the upper right corner of the spreadsheet. Although this goldenback gorilla was already 300 years old, it was still considered a teenager in its family. All spiritual pets basically had a contract, and usually, spiritual pet contracts could be inherited through direct blood relations. Thus, Wang Ling speculated that the one in He Bufing's hand was probably a family heirloom. There were actually a lot of goldenback gorillas in the world of spirit beasts, so they couldn't be considered rare. But in the world of spirit pets, they were priceless, and very few people would keep such a gorilla as a pet at home. This also indirectly confirmed that He Bufing's family conditions were actually pretty good, but it wasn't clear exactly how good they were. Apart from He Bufing's goldenback gorilla this time, Reliance High School had also brought out a ferocious spirit beast, a land shark. Furthermore, it was a third-class one. Its owner was Aluminum Tree, one of the 3 tree brothers whom Teacher Yi had mentioned last time. Land sharks were fairly rare aggressive spirit beasts that could live on land and water, but while they were aggressive, they were very easy to tame. If you could raise a land shark cub from a young age and feed it meat and potato chips every day, its loyalty would definitely go through the roof. While it was true that land sharks were indeed very strong, they also had a fairly big flaw, and that was that they ate a lot. This species of spirit beast loved to eat, and not only did they like to eat, they were also very picky about what they ate, and normal people couldn't afford to keep them at all. Looking at this spreadsheet, Wang Ling couldn't help sighing in his heart. It turned out that the 2 opponents he had run into this time were both nouveau riches. In contrast, Wang Ling felt that Loopy Toad was really a lot easier to raise. It wasn't big, and apart from being easy to carry around, it also saved on food. The most important thing was that when you were tired from doing homework, its green fur always gave you a feeling of spring. As he thought this, Wang Ling scrolled down the spreadsheet and saw the specific information on the land shark. Name, Aluminum Small Fish. Age, 233 years. Rank, 3rd class spirit beast. Personality, loves water, walks, gluttony. Ferocious hobbies, all kinds of meat and potato chip. Special characteristics, it won't move if it doesn't eat. Chapter 376. There were 3 spirit beast aptitude assessment centers in Shanghai City, which were mainly used to identify spirit beasts. You just needed to produce a relevant soul pet contract and pay a certain test fee before you could take part in the aptitude assessment test. Loopy Toad had been in Wang Ling's house for a long time, but it actually hadn't signed a contract yet, because this kind of contract was actually meaningless to both Wang Ling and Loopy Toad. A soul pet contract existed so that when a soul pet went out of control, the owner could use the power of the contract to forcibly suppress it and restrain it. But as a pet under Ling Jinren, this kind of contract was basically useless. First of all, it was impossible for Loopy Toad to go out of control, and it was even more impossible for it to resist Wang Ling. Wouldn't that be deliberately making things difficult for itself? But in order to participate in the Spirit Beast Aptitude Assessment Center's test this time, Wang Ling and Loopy Toad had signed a contract last night, and then Loopy Toad had left with it. The Toad clan had a space-swallowing spell. Although Loopy Toad was now a dog, as long as it could use spirit energy and knew the formula for this spell, it could still use it normally. And this contract was now hidden in Loopy Toad's mouth. It was almost 11 o'clock in the afternoon when a green Akita appeared at the entrance of the Aptitude Assessment Center. This was the Spirit Beast Aptitude Assessment Center in the center of the city. It was a very magnificent building shaped like a giant egg, densely inlaid with all kinds of decorative spirit stones. Loopy Toad jumped up to the glass door in 2 or 3 steps. Although it hadn't entered yet, it could already hear the noise inside. There was a long line in front of the reception desk as many cultivators lined up with their spirit beasts to wait for the aptitude assessment. What Loopy Toad hadn't expected was that the spirit beasts in front of it were fairly normal in size. There were all kinds of spirit beasts. Some flew in the sky, some ran on the ground, some swam in the water. The most novel spirit beast was actually a butterfly, and its owner was a youngster in a red cap who stood in front of Loopy Toad. The butterfly was very obediently perched on the youngster's shoulder and didn't move at all. Loopy Toad was at the end of the line, and the moment it saw the butterfly, it immediately broke out in a sweat. This was probably a rare spirit butterfly, but it couldn't tell which species it was. The classification of spirit beasts in the cultivation world was really too complicated, and there were all kinds of strange things. Generally speaking, whether a spirit beast was good or bad depended on its strength. As long as one was strong enough, even a spiritual ant could be called a king. Nowadays, there were quite a few cultivators who relied on the spirit beasts they raised to travel all over the country to participate in spirit pet competitions to make money. This was a new industry, and the Spirit Beast Qualification Appraisal Center was born to serve this industry. On the one hand, it could link up with pets with intelligence competitions all over the country to provide the government with accurate data of spirit beasts. On the other hand, it could also make a record of the spirit beasts in captivity all over the country. In case something happened, the appraisal center could directly contact the owner. While it was in line, Loopy Toad saw the youngster in the red cap standing in front of it suddenly look at it. "Did you come by yourself? Where's your master?" Loopy Toad looked up at the clock in the main hall of the Qualification Assessment Center and directly replied, "He's in class." In the end, this reply didn't matter, but all the spirit beasts and their owners in the line nearby looked at Loopy Toad in utter astonishment. Even the security guards who were responsible for maintaining order in the line and the managers of the Qualification Assessment Center were stunned. Holy shit! This green-furred dog could actually talk? Generally speaking, only second-class spirit beasts had a rudimentary language system, right? Under normal circumstances, only the owner who had signed the contract with the spirit pet could understand the words of a spirit beast that had not reached the second stage. The youngster stared at Loopy Toad in utter astonishment. "You can talk? You're second class?" Loopy Toad was very modest. "Second class? I don't think so." The youngster was a little puzzled. "Then how can you talk?" "Loopy Toad, I can also write. Is it hard to learn?" "Everyone," the youngster took a deep breath. He had initially wondered which owner would be so generous as to let his spirit pet participate in the qualification assessment on its own. That was because there was a follow-up question and answer session that required the cooperation of the owner. But if the spirit pet could talk and write, there really wouldn't be a need for the owner to participate in the qualification assessment. This youngster was actually the kind of cultivator who specialized in raising spirit beasts and then took them to competitions all over the country. So the moment he saw Loopy Toad, he was instantly captivated. He felt that this green-furred dog wasn't just ordinarily handsome. A spirit beast under second class that could talk and write? What kind of breed was it? The youngster was extremely curious about Loopy Toad, and straightaway crouched down and stretched out his hand. "Hello, let's get to know each other. I'm Wei Ji from Jinshin Town. You can call me Little Ji." Loopy Toad was blank, feeling like it had heard this line somewhere before. But it still put its paw on the youngster's hand out of courtesy. This youngster called Wei Ji looked very excited. "Were you born with green fur?" Loopy Toad nodded its head. "Sort of." Actually, Loopy Toad had long wanted to ridicule its green fur. Although it had been a demon king in its past life, it had always behaved itself and hadn't done anything outrageous. The biggest crime it had committed in its life was probably when it had descended into the gate between worlds 6 years ago. Some people might not believe it, but at that time, it had been pushed out by the combined efforts of the other demon kings. In the end, it had turned into a box as soon as it landed. Apart from that incident, Loopy Toad felt that it was a pretty honest toad. But when Teacher Pan had fused it with a dog and turned it into a green-furred Akita, Loopy Toad had actually despaired in its heart at that time. Who hadn't made mistakes when they were young, but was there a need to turn themselves into the color of forgiveness? This might not have been a big deal to other people, but for Loopy Toad, it was a real pain in the ass. Because of this youngster called Wei Ji's sudden change of pace, Loopy Toad noticed that more and more eyes were now focused on it. Even the staff responsible for boarding the plane at the front desk stared at it with strange expressions on their faces. When it was Wei Ji's turn to fill in the identification form, he looked at Loopy Toad with some concern in his eyes. Do you want me to fill it out for you? It's not convenient for you to hold the pen with your dog paw, right? Loopy Toad shook its head. No need, I can do it myself. Wei Ji and the staff at the front desk were startled. Then Wei Ji gave Loopy Toad a data form and a pen, and he couldn't help laughing. This is the first time I've seen a dog write. Loopy Toad skillfully picked up the pen. In fact, it wasn't so much holding as using spirit energy to suck the pen into its paw. This was a posture that Loopy Toad had specially studied, and it was easier to hold the pen back and forth. When Loopy Toad started to fill in the form, a lot of the people in the queue couldn't help watching. Even Wei Ji couldn't help glancing at Loopy Toad as he filled in the form. All of a sudden, Wei Ji asked curiously, "What breed of spirit dog are you?" Loopy Toad replied indifferently, "Akita." Akita? Everyone was shocked, because Akitas were just ordinary breeds of dogs and weren't classified as spirit dogs at all. Wei Ji was greatly shocked. "You're a hybrid?" The corners of Loopy Toad's eyes twitched. "You're the hybrid." Chapter 377. Lying on the ground, Loopy Toad finished filling out the registration form. Wei Ji helped Loopy Toad hand the form to the receptionist at the front desk, and in the end he was greatly shocked when he saw the words on the form. Many people might not be able to write this beautiful skinny body. Although Loopy Toad had written it with a dog paw, the words were so neat that they looked like they had been printed. How did you practice? Wei Ji was now more and more curious about Loopy Toad. He felt that this was definitely a dog with a story. Diligent and diligent. Loopy Toad's answer was just 4 words. As it spoke, Loopy Toad's eyes looked a little smug, but there wasn't much joy on its face. Loopy Toad didn't know if it was because it had been with Ling Jinren for too long, but it felt that its facial expression had clearly become a lot less rigid, and it was also faintly showing signs of facial paralysis. "You're really interesting. If it's possible, I really want to meet your owner," Wei Ji said. "If there's a chance." Loopy Toad replied very politely. From this reply, Wei Ji instantly understood that if he wanted this strange green-furred Akita to help him meet its owner, it would be impossible. But even if it didn't take him there, Wei Ji felt that he could find his way there. That registration form just now had its owner's name and specific home address written on it. When he had helped Loopy Toad submit the registration form, Wei Ji had also secretly taken a photo. He could follow the address and find his way there. What kind of person could raise such a strange Akita? Wei Ji was becoming more and more curious. On the side, Loopy Toad couldn't help laughing in its heart when it saw Wei Ji's evil plan succeeding. When all was said and done, he was still a youngster, too young. Loopy Toad had in fact already sensed that Wei Ji had secretly taken the photo, but it wasn't worried at all, because the Great Shielding Spell would definitely affect the data that had been secretly stolen like this and turn it into a mosaic. After waiting at the reception desk for a while, the staff quickly entered Wei Ji's information and the information that Loopy Toad had filled in into the computer, and then gave them 2 number plates. "Please go to the testing hall and wait in line for the test." Loopy Toad held the number plate in its mouth. It was number 177, and Wei Ji was number 176. After seeing the number plate clearly, Loopy Toad raised its head and emitted a faint spirit light from its mouth. It directly used the space-swallowing spell to put the number plate away. It would be a little troublesome if it hung on its body. Wei Ji was even more surprised to see this. "What spell technique is that?" Loopy Toad replied, "It's nothing. It's a very ordinary space spell that can store things in my mouth." When Wei Ji heard that, he cursed, "Mouth trick?" Loopy Toad, a man and a dog walked toward the testing hall. The interior of the appraisal center was very large, and it was very easy to get lost here for the first time. But Loopy Toad appeared very calm, and strode forward without the slightest hesitation. "There's a map over there. Do you want to take a look?" Wei Ji asked. "No need." Loopy Toad shook its head. Before coming to the testing hall, Loopy Toad had already memorized the aura of the person in front of Wei Ji in line. It was now following the aura of the person in front of it. That person had already arrived at the testing hall, and his aura had already stabilized, so there was no doubt about it. Although this wasn't Wei Ji's first time at the appraisal center, it was in fact Wei Ji's first time here as well. He followed Loopy Toad, and in the end they arrived at their destination. This time Wei Ji's reverence for Loopy Toad deepened. It could talk, write, use the mouth trick, and even navigate. This was simply a must-have pet for home travel. At that moment, Wei Ji had already made up his mind. When he went back, he was going to get a dog too. When they arrived at the entrance, there were a lot of people in line in the testing hall. Loopy Toad glanced around and saw that there were more than 10 people in front of it. The testing wasn't as fast as filling in the form, and it would probably take a while. However, the people in line could view live images of the spirit beasts being tested through the crystal screen in the center of the testing hall. These images would only be played with the owner's consent. If the owner didn't agree, the images wouldn't be played publicly. However, the vast majority of people who had spirit beasts and had full confidence in them would choose to agree to this option. This was a chance to show off publicly and satisfy all kinds of vanity. As long as the spirit pet was strong enough, the owner would also be proud. Loopy Toad stared at the crystal screen. This was an image from room 2 of the testing hall. It was a rabbit with muscles all over its body being tested. This rabbit wasn't just ordinarily big. It was a full 160 meters tall, and it was covered in muscles all over its body. It wore boxing gloves on both hands and looked very terrifying. Who knew if it was because of its owner's bad taste, but the rabbit's ears were tied in a bow. Muscle spirit rabbit? Wei Ji recognized the breed at a glance, and then began to observe the rabbit. The color of its fur isn't bad. It's also very muscular. I'm guessing it's at least 4th class. It's a spirit beast with high attack speed and strength. It's at 6th class in its infancy, and can rise to 3rd class at the highest. But it's quite difficult to raise it, since it's very susceptible to illness in its infancy. The advantage is that once it's raised, it's very loyal, and it's suitable for all kinds of battles. Loopy Toad nodded its head slightly. It hadn't expected Wei Ji, who looked so young, to actually know so much. Wei Ji crouched down next to Loopy Toad and smiled slightly. I'll tell you a secret in secret, Loopy Toad. Wei Ji, this rabbit has already been sterilized. Loopy Toad, Wei Ji sighed and said, apart from being particularly susceptible to illness, this is the second biggest drawback of this kind of rabbit. It's very greedy. If it's not controlled and is let loose for a year, it can form a military alliance for you. Loopy Toad, one man and one dog chatted like that in front of the door. Loopy Toad tried its best not to talk during this time, and did its best to be an unobtrusive dog. But because of Wei Ji's earlier momentum, most of the people who had come to take the test today had an impression of Loopy Toad. Even as it was about to enter the testing hall, some people were still pointing at it. It wasn't long before it was finally Wei Ji's turn. Brother dog, I'll go first. Wei Ji crouched down and rubbed Loopy Toad's head as he took the opportunity to take advantage of it. Loopy Toad. Very quickly, the image of Wei Ji taking the test with the spirit butterfly was projected on the screen. The first segment was a strength test. In the center of the testing room was a strength tester, which could measure the corresponding strength value by hitting it. Wei Ji's spirit butterfly flew over unhurriedly and stopped in front of the tester. Everyone stared at this scene. Roughly 2 seconds later, everyone heard a violent boom. Loopy Toad was startled when it saw the value displayed on the tester. Such a small spirit butterfly actually had the strength of 2000 gene? Damn, what kind of spirit butterfly is this? Someone on the side exclaimed. Another person stared at the screen and said hesitantly, it looks like a pushing large butterfly? Pushing large butterfly? That's right. This type of butterfly has a very, very thick cocoon as big as a basketball before it matures. They have to dig their way out of the cocoon layer by layer, which is why they're called pushing large butterflies. Chapter 378. There were many tests at the assessment center. In addition to the 5 basic ability tests of strength, speed, jumping, defense and intelligence, the most important part was the final practical test. Before Wei Ji had entered, Loopy Toad had heard him say that the assessment center had trained the spirit beasts for the practical test. The abilities of all the test beasts were the same. The only difference was their grades. The assessment center's usual rule was that after the 5 basic ability tests, the instructors would directly assess the spirit beast's grade based on its overall ability. For example, if a spirit beast was assessed as a 4th class spirit beast, it would be assigned a 4th class test beast for practical combat in the final segment. If the spirit beast won, its final grade would be upgraded to 3rd class or kept unchanged based on its performance in the actual combat. But if it lost, it would be demoted by 1 level. This rule had been set when the assessment center had first been established, and could actually be considered fairly fair. The only troublesome thing was the test beast's abilities. According to Wei Ji, all the test beasts in the assessment center were spirit emperor penguins. Loopy Toad had learned about this type of spirit beast before. Apart from being extremely patient and able to take a beating, they also had an extremely powerful ability to imitate. In a short period of time, they could completely replicate the spells that spirit beasts cast, and could be considered quite versatile. But they also had a weakness. and that was that their lethality was generally very limited. Thus, Spirit Emperor penguins were actually the most suitable spirit beasts for the assessment center to use as test beasts. While Loopy Toad was still thinking about this, a test room had already been emptied. At the same time, a number was announced, and it was Loopy Toad's number, 177. There were 5 test rooms in the test hall in total. Wei Ji had entered room 4, and the test room that Loopy Toad was about to enter was room 5, which was next to Wei Ji's. Loopy Toad glanced at the screen. Wei Ji and its pushing large butterfly had just started the speed test. After the number was called, Loopy Toad spat out the number plate from its mouth and waited quietly at the door of room 5. After that, the person who had entered room 5 to take the test first came out. It was a man in a black trench coat, and the spirit beast behind him was actually a small bone dragon. This small bone dragon looked very obedient as it followed the man in the black trench coat, but the 2 balls of hellfire in its eyes looked very terrifying. Is this guy a foreigner? Loopy Toad's heart trembled. Spirit beasts like bone dragons were all necromancers, and it was impossible to see them in Huaxiao Nation. Furthermore, domestic cultivators mostly pursued auspicious feng shui, and very few people would want to raise a spirit beast of the undead type. Therefore, the domestic market was not very good, but this kind of spirit beast was quite popular abroad. I really want to see the grade of this bone dragon. It should be very powerful. But it seems like its owner didn't choose to publicize the video of the test. What a pity. It's rare to see one. Discussions could be heard from the surrounding people. Loopy Toad watched the man in the black trench coat and the little bone dragon as they walked toward the door step by step. When they reached the entrance of the test hall, Loopy Toad saw the man in the black trench coat suddenly pause. Then Loopy Toad clearly sensed a powerful spiritual sense bearing down on it. Trying to test me? Loopy Toad narrowed its eyes and deliberately released its Demon King soul in return. As a result, the man in the black windbreaker at the door was obviously stunned. Then he staggered and almost fell. Loopy Toad sneered in its heart at this scene. A golden core cultivator, what the hell was he showing off to it for? After the man in the black windbreaker left with his bone dragon, Loopy Toad waited at the door for over 3 minutes before a very greasy-looking middle-aged male instructor came out of the test room. Mr. 2, sorry to keep you waiting. We were clearing the place just now, you can go in and take the test now. Loopy Toad's lips couldn't help twitching when it heard this form of address. Mr. 2. This form of address sounded very stupid. The middle-aged instructor flipped through the information in his hands. Looking at the information, this should be Mr. 2's first time here, right? Loopy Toad nodded, then gave the middle-aged instructor a strange look. Don't you think it's strange that I can speak? The middle-aged instructor shook his head with an indifferent expression on his face. I've been working in this field for more than 10 years. There's a good saying, you haven't eaten pork but you've seen a pig run. Loopy Toad, the middle-aged instructor, generally speaking, only second-class spirit beasts possess the ability to speak. But I have more than 10,000 spirit beasts appraised under my supervision, and occasionally I'll run into a few that can speak even if they haven't reached a certain grade. According to the requirements of the recently popular organization, the Society of Saints, these spirit beasts should also be exceptionally gifted. Loopy Toad, the middle-aged instructor looked at Loopy Toad and couldn't help laughing. But you seem to be able to write? That's an exceptionally gifted among exceptionally gifted. Be careful when you go back, otherwise you might really be caught by the Society of Saints. Loopy Toad, the Society of Saints also accepts spirit beasts? The middle-aged instructor also looked at Loopy Toad in utter amazement. You don't even know this? The Society of Saints has a spirit beast class. Do you remember their TV commercial? The few dragonflies that flew past that youngster were all advanced species. Loopy Toad was stunned. There was actually such a detail? It hadn't noticed at all. It should be said that most people's gazes were focused on that youngster from Building Materials High, xuanhuan. As the middle-aged instructor walked, he looked at Loopy Toad. It might be an occupational disease that I've developed over the years. I'm far more sensitive to spirit beasts than outsiders. When I saw those dragonflies, I wondered if the Society of Saints had some sort of spirit beast class. In the end, I looked it up online and there really is one. Furthermore, it seems that they've recently been working with spirit beast appraisal centers all over the country to look for exceptionally gifted spirit beasts. Loopy Toad didn't know why, but it suddenly felt a hair-raising sense of danger. One man and one dog chatted as they officially arrived at the testing room. There were several machines in the testing room. The middle-aged instructor said, Mr. Second should have seen it on the screen outside. Next up are the 5 basic ability tests. After the tests are over, I'll deduce your grade and arrange for a test beast to fight you in actual combat. Speaking up to this point, the middle-aged instructor suddenly had a smug look on his face. To tell you the truth, I raised all the Spirit Emperor penguins in this appraisal center. Loopy Toad, you raised them? That's right. Our Ma family has raised all kinds of penguins as a business for generations. The middle-aged instructor held up his work ID in front of Loopy Toad and was very proud. I am Ma Huateng, the only son of the Ma family's 30th generation. Loopy Toad. Chapter 379. The entire test went smoothly, and Loopy Toad successfully came out of the test room at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Its test hadn't been directly made public, and because of Wei Ji's provocation earlier, too many eyes had been focused on it. Thus, Loopy Toad decided to keep a low profile and leave after the test. The great appraisal didn't mean much to begin with. Whether it was for Loopy Toad or Wang Ling, it was actually just a formality. Loopy Toad had a very clear assessment of its own capabilities, and as long as it had a clear idea in its heart, that was actually enough. After the appraisal qualification test, the qualification certificate would be mailed home within 3 working days, and all that was left was to wait. As Loopy Toad thought this, it walked out of the appraisal center's main entrance, and was stunned to find Wei Ji leaning against a stone pillar waiting for it. When it had come out of the test room earlier, it hadn't seen Wei Ji, and thought that he had already left. It hadn't expected this guy to be waiting for it here. Yo, brother dog. What a coincidence. I just came out of the test not long ago, I never thought we'd meet again. Wei Ji waved his hand as he looked at Loopy Toad, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Loopy Toad. It had truly never seen such a shameless person. Actually, Loopy Toad didn't dislike Wei Ji. On the contrary, it thought this friendly youngster was a little interesting. The most important thing was that Loopy Toad realized that Wei Ji was very knowledgeable about the entire spirit beast system in Huaxiao Nation, and could be said to be very knowledgeable. And this was all knowledge that Loopy Toad wanted to understand. Maybe they could be friends? Loopy Toad pondered in its heart. How was the test? What grade? As he spoke, Wei Ji habitually grabbed the brim of his red cap and pulled it back. This was probably Wei Ji's signature move, which Loopy Toad had seen quite a few times at the appraisal center. 4th grade. Loopy Toad felt that it had nothing to hide about the test results. In any case, it had held back for this result, and its real grade should be peak 3rd grade. To Loopy Toad's surprise, it seemed that Wei Ji had already anticipated this result, and smiled at it with a calculated expression. Brother dog, you held back, didn't you? Loopy Toad wagged its tail. You know again? Our family has been raising spirit pets for generations, and we have a unique secret art that allows us to judge a spirit beast's strength through a special aura, which is unique to spirit beasts. I smelled it on Brother Dog and it's very concentrated. You're at least at 3rd class. Speaking up to this point, Wei Ji suddenly stared at Loopy Toad and couldn't help wiping away his saliva. Loopy Toad was stunned. What the hell? What was he trying to do? Wei Ji asked. Brother Dog, do you mind letting me hug you? Loopy Toad, get lost. Wei Ji sighed, and there was an obvious sense of loss on his face. Sai, why is it like this? It's fate after all. It's been a long time since I've smelled such a strong and unique scent. The corner of Loopy Toad's mouth twitched. Are you a dog? How did you know? Loopy Toad. After a moment of silence, Loopy Toad looked into the distance. I'm going home. Saying this, it jumped down the steps very handsomely. There was an endless stream of cars and pedestrians in front of the appraisal center. The sun shone directly on Loopy Toad's green dog fur, which was still very obvious even in the middle of the crowd. Standing on the steps, Wei Ji looked at Loopy Toad's back and shouted, Brother Dog, will we ever meet again? Loopy Toad didn't say anything and just raised a front paw. Only then did Wei Ji realize that his hat had actually been taken away. I'll look for you. When it was a distance away, Loopy Toad turned its head slightly, and then its figure flashed as it disappeared into the crowd like a bolt of lightning. As expected, Brother Dog isn't simple. At the entrance to the appraisal center, Wei Ji took out a new hat and put it on his head, his heart filled with endless excitement. On the way back, Loopy Toad quietly crouched under a bench at the bus stop, ready to take the next spirit bus back to the Wang family's small villa. It had also done the same thing before. Considering that it would cause a huge uproar if a dog paid its own fare or used a public transport card to take public transport, Loopy Toad's usual strategy was to wait for the moment the door opened to slip in like a bolt of lightning to hide, and then leave 2 coins under the bench before leaving. Loopy Toad had tried this method time and time again, and it was very confident in its speed. Even if the surveillance footage wasn't slowed down by around 50 times, it wouldn't even be able to see its shadow. Just as Loopy Toad was crouching under the bench and yawning, it suddenly sensed a familiar aura, which instantly raised its guard. It had smelled this aura before. And it was very obvious that it was hostile. Under the bench, Loopy Toad narrowed its eyes, and then saw a guy in a black windbreaker appear in front of it. Loopy Toad was sure that this was the man in the black windbreaker who had brought the bone dragon with him in the test hall. Was he here for revenge? Loopy Toad couldn't help laughing in its heart. It was too lazy to avoid him and simply walked straight out. In the end, it realized that as soon as it walked out, several black shadows had appeared out of nowhere and directly surrounded it. These people had lassos in their hands and a cage in their hands. The most frightening thing was that one of them even had a taser in his hand. This group of people had wretched smiles on their faces, and it was obvious that they were up to no good. K, what were they doing? Loopy Toad knew that it had already been targeted. Staring at the men in black in front of it, Loopy Toad's heart sank. There were now 5 men in black surrounding it, and all of them were at the golden core stage. If it had only been 1 or 2 of them, Loopy Toad felt that it could completely deal with them, but given the current situation, after all, 4 paws were no match for 10 hands and it would be too much for it to fight them. But if it wanted to slip away, it might still be able to find a chance. Thinking this, Loopy Toad felt resentful. In any case, it had been a demon king back then. If it hadn't been for the fact that it hadn't recovered to its peak, it would have been able to swallow these insignificant miscellaneous cultivators in one bite. Hello, Mr. Dog. Our organization is very interested in you, and would like to invite you over for some tea and a snack, the man in black with the bone dragon said with a sinister smile as he held the lasso in his hand. Loopy Toad looked at the men in black in front of it with an indescribable look on its face. Robbing a civilian dog in broad daylight was still acceptable. It had finally managed to come out for a stroll, and now it was being targeted just for the certification exam. What kind of lousy thing was this? And if I refuse? Loopy Toad looked at the man and replied. The man in black pulled out the taser he carried with him. This taser is a specially modified electric magic treasure that can emit 100,000 volts of electricity. Speaking up to this point, the man chuckled. If you don't come with us, I'll knock out even a ghost. Chapter 380. Loopy Toad really didn't know what to say when they had gone to such lengths to catch it. It felt that its performance at the assessment center today had actually been low-key enough. Just because it couldn't speak and write before reaching 2nd class, they thought it was exceptionally talented and wanted to catch it? Wasn't this Society of Saints a little too sloppy? Furthermore, Loopy Toad had a hunch that these people might be related to the Society of Saints, but they definitely weren't from the society. A state-certified talent organization that had formal channels of cooperation with major schools and organizations, why would they not use those channels and specifically send people to kidnap so-called geniuses in broad daylight? If this group of people really were from the Society of Saints, Loopy Toad could only think that their brains had probably been kicked by a donkey. Are you from the Society of Saints? Loopy Toad asked in order to confirm its suspicions. You can think of it that way. The Bone Dragon Man smiled. Loopy Toad nodded after hearing this. It was already certain that this group of people weren't from the Society of Saints, or at least not from official channels. If they really were from the Society of Saints, how hard would it be to admit it? The Society of Saints was now the talk of the country and the education world was shaken. Everyone in the city knew about it, and it was an absolute honor for most people to be able to work in such an organization. Loopy Toad sighed in its heart. It had finally come out and it didn't want to stir up trouble. If little Master Ling found out, he would probably be unhappy again. Suddenly, Loopy Toad pointed to the sky. A UFO. In the end, these men in black weren't fooled at all. The Bone Dragon Man couldn't help laughing. Do you think we're 3-year-olds? How could we fall for this kind of trick? Loopy Toad didn't admit defeat and pointed to the sky again. Yui Aragaki. The Bone Dragon Man chuckled. It's no use, come with us obediently. In our line of work, apart from our mission goals, we're not moved by anything else. Loopy Toad suddenly felt a chill run down its spine. Not only were these men perverts who liked trapping dogs, they were actually a bunch of gays. At that moment, Loopy Toad felt that it had to use its trump card. Once again and for the last time, Loopy Toad pointed to the sky. Playful on you. In that instant, the men in black were inexplicably dazed. It was as if they had been hypnotized, and their foreheads followed Loopy Toad's paw to look at the sky behind them in a very demonic manner. The sun is very bright today, but there's nothing at all. In an instant, the men came back to their senses. Led by the skeletal dragon man, All of them were flustered and exasperated. Damn it. He was actually led away. When he looked back, the green-furred dog that was originally under his feet had already slipped away. On the distant horizon, it was turning into a small green dot at a speed visible to the naked eye. Quick, chase them. The bone dragon man gritted his teeth and shouted. The 5 of them didn't give up. One by one, they controlled their magic treasures and split into 3 groups to pursue. It was obvious that this was not the first time these 5 people had done this. They were very familiar with the surrounding streets and terrain. Loopy Toad never thought that this group of Society of Saints impersonators would actually be so obsessed with it. Furthermore, it felt that the other party had probably already planted a spirit mark on it. Furthermore, it wasn't very familiar with the surroundings of the Spirit Beast Assessment Center. In the city, the area it was most familiar with was the area around the food market that it often went to with Mother Wong and the old man. In short, if it continued to be chased like this, the situation would only get worse. At that moment, Loopy Toad's first thought was Dopeygua's family's pet shop, the Soul Servant Shop. It knew that the shop was in the city center and wasn't far from the Spirit Beast Assessment Center. As a long-established pet shop, Dopey's family's Soul Servant Shop occupied a prime location. As long as it could escape there, this group of people would probably give up on chasing it, right? Loopy Toad thought to itself. Loopy Toad remembered very clearly the specific address written on the bags of New Orleans fly-flavored dog food that Dopeygu had provided earlier. But the problem was that it couldn't calm down and study the route at all in this situation where it was being chased. This dog was unfamiliar with the place, and it was quite awkward. But just as Loopy Toad passed through an alley onto a street, a small black car suddenly drove up from the side. The driver was actually Wei Ji. Wei Ji didn't stop the car, but merely slowed it down and waved at Loopy Toad. The window in the back was already down. No time to explain. Get in the car. At that moment, Loopy Toad didn't say another word. It directly jumped up from the entrance of the alley and flew into the moving black car. One man and one dog worked very well together. Hi, brother dog. As expected, our fate isn't shallow. Wei Ji greeted Loopy Toad through the rearview mirror. Loopy Toad had actually never believed in fate, but today it realized that it and Wei Ji's fate really wasn't shallow. How did you know I was here? In the car, Loopy Toad stared at Wei Ji, feeling very amazed. Brother dog, did you forget that I told you that you have a special aura on you? This special aura is unique to every spirit beast, and there are subtle differences. Only people in our family can smell it. Wei Ji couldn't help laughing. Since there's a way to smell out special auras, there's naturally a way to track them. When I left the assessment center just now, I suddenly passed by a street and smelled this familiar aura. Furthermore, it felt like it was abnormally thick. Usually, it's only when we're in danger that the intensity of this aura will soar. Loopy Toad, Wei Ji, let me say this first, I didn't deliberately follow you. I only set out a minute after you left. Loopy Toad, Wei Ji, I just happened to pass by that street and didn't see the bus stop or the group of men in black chasing you. Loopy Toad, Wei Ji, in short, everything that happened between you and me, brother dog, was preordained by fate. Loopy Toad, Wei Ji drove the black car forward, steering the steering wheel and ignoring all obstacles. Loopy Toad was stunned to realize that Wei Ji's driving skills were godly. It would really be a pity if he didn't participate in the Fast and Furious series with this level of skill. But this wasn't enough to completely shake off the pursuit of the men in black. Wei Ji's temper flared up. What kind of people are they? 5 golden core cultivators trying to catch a dog? This is really strange. Loopy Toad sighed. I've been marked with a spirit sense, I have to think of a way to wash it off first. Wei Ji, how? Loopy Toad, go around the area first. I'll lick my body with my saliva and it'll wash off. Wei Ji, including my chrysanthemum? Loopy Toad. Chapter 381. After about 3 or 4 minutes, Loopy Toad finally got rid of the spirit marks on its body. A dog's body wasn't as soft as a cat's, and it usually had to curl up to lick some difficult actions. Fortunately, Loopy Toad's tongue was long enough, and it hadn't completely given up on the Toad clan's tongue technique. So when Wei Ji saw that Loopy Toad could extend its tongue for more than a meter, his entire heart crumbled. As expected, brother dog wasn't an ordinary dog. Wei Ji sighed endlessly in his heart. After circling a few more times on the nearby road, the group of black-clothed men finally lost track of them in the traffic. Loopy Toad's tactic had worked, but it wasn't sure if those men in black had any other way of finding it. Although it had indeed escaped, Loopy Toad still felt like it hadn't been wiped clean. Who on earth are these people? Why are they chasing you? Wei Ji stopped racing after breaking away from their pursuers and drove steadily on the road. They should be a bunch of people pretending to be from the Society of Saints, said Loopy Toad. The Society of Saints? They don't just accept people, they also accept spirit beasts? Wei Ji was amused. When I was at the assessment center, a test instructor told me that the Society of Saints does indeed have a spirit beast class. Loopy Toad sighed. But the people chasing me clearly aren't from the Society of Saints. How can a state-certified organization be so violent? That's true. Wei Ji nodded. These people are a little too bold to dare pretend to be from the Society of Saints. Wouldn't it be very awkward if they ran into real people from the Society of Saints? However, at this point, Wei Ji suddenly had to complain about the standard of some of the pirated businesses in the country. Pirated businesses basically relied on popularity. If a milk tea shop became popular, there would be tens of thousands of milk tea shops with similar names. If a hot pot restaurant became popular, there would be similar hot pot restaurants everywhere. Wei Ji guessed that this fake Society of Saints was also a knockoff group like this. Brother Dog, where are you going now? Loopy Toad thought for a bit. If it went back like this, it could guarantee that it would be safe, but it couldn't guarantee that those men in black wouldn't cause trouble later on. Judging from this group of men in black's obsession with it, Loopy Toad felt that it was very likely that there would be trouble later on. And the most important thing was that Loopy Toad felt that it wasn't the type to hold back after suffering a loss. Even though it was no longer a demon king, since that group of people had come looking for him, he had to make them pay the price. I want to get rid of these people, said Loopy Toad. So now was not the time to go back. Brother Dog, do you have a way to track them? Loopy Toad, I've already memorized their scents. As long as I lock onto them along the way with the aura tracking spell, I might be able to find their lair. But just as Loopy Toad finished speaking, Wei Ji suddenly saw through the rearview mirror that two sports cars were following them closely. Damn it, that group of people is catching up again. Wei Ji stepped on the ground and directly chose to accelerate. He should have thought of it. When this group of people chased after him just now, they made a spiritual mark on the car together. After dealing with this group of people for a few more minutes, Wei Ji finally parked the car in an alley and abandoned it with Loopy Toad. Although Loopy Toad's saliva could remove spiritual marks, given the current situation, it was clearly extremely unrealistic for it to lick a car from top to bottom. How can these people's spiritual marks be so accurate? I remember that there's a chance that this spell will fail, right? Wei Ji complained after getting out of the car as he led Loopy Toad toward a residential building. Do you see that apartment in front of us? That's where I live. Let's hide inside first and think of a countermeasure. Loopy Toad followed Wei Ji as one man and one dog moved at high speed. It wasn't until then that Loopy Toad realized that Wei Ji's strength wasn't simple. His footsteps actually didn't make the slightest sound when they touched the ground, which proved that Wei Ji's body movement technique was very impressive. However, this level of body movement technique didn't match the level of Wei Ji's aura. Thus, Loopy Toad felt that Wei Ji was also hiding some of his strength, but it still had to be verified exactly how strong he was. Generally speaking, aristocratic families who mainly fought by domesticating spirit beasts weren't very strong, and needed to rely on spirit beasts to make up for the gap between themselves and their opponents. But Loopy Toad didn't think too much about it. After all, it was hiding a lot of secrets. Everyone had secrets and there was no way to live without them. When they reached the ground floor of the apartment, Wei Ji led Loopy Toad up to the 23rd floor. Loopy Toad was surprised to find that there was only one door on the entire 23rd floor. Is this your home? Loopy Toad asked. Wei Ji grinned. To be exact, this entire floor is mine. There were originally 4 suites on this floor, but I bought them all. Then, I knocked down the walls and connected them together into one. Loopy Toad. This was simply inhumanly rich. However, this also indirectly reflected that the current industry of taming spiritual beasts was indeed extremely profitable. In a sense, if this sunrise industry continued to develop in the future, it was very likely that it would stand shoulder to shoulder with the established industries such as smithing and alchemy. In fact, it might even surpass them. For those who were full of vanity, having a powerful battle pet would bring glory to their faces. Entering Wei Ji's home, Loopy Toad felt as if it had entered a garden. Wei Ji's living room was very unique, and had been carefully decorated to imitate a natural ecological environment. There were rockery, a small stream, birdsong, and the fragrance of flowers. This was basically a small forest. I spent a lot of money to decorate this environment. Wei Ji rubbed his head and smiled. With a snap of his fingers, the pushing large butterfly that had been lying motionless on his shoulder suddenly seemed to wake up. It slowly flew off his shoulder and then perched on a petal. Loopy Toad finally understood that this ecological environment had been specially built for this pushing large butterfly. It's very safe here, those people probably won't be able to find us, Weiji said with a slight smile. Loopy Toad, are you so sure? Weiji nodded. This apartment has an unusual origin. It used to be a family apartment, and the people who lived here were all senior military cadres. Loopy Toad. Are you a asterisk? My grandfather gave me this house. When it came to my father's generation, our family no longer had any contact with the army. We had to tame spirit beasts on one hand and manage the army on the other. We were really too busy. Weiji shrugged. As he spoke, he tugged at a vine hanging from the ceiling, and a side door immediately opened. Come in, this is my bedroom, Weiji said. Loopy Toad followed Weiji into his bedroom, which was decorated quite normally. Then Loopy Toad saw Weiji start to rummage through the bedroom. Are you hungry? I happen to have a bag of dog food here. I got it from my nephew, Weiji said. You have a nephew? Loopy Toad was amazed. Actually, we're not that far apart in age, but in terms of seniority, I'm indeed his little uncle, Weiji said. A moment later, Weiji took out a bag of high-grade dog food wrapped in white from the cupboard with the words, Soul Servant Shop, written on it. Wait, Soul Servant Shop? Wasn't this Dopeygua's pet shop? Loopy Toad suddenly realized that it seemed to have learned some incredible secret. Chapter 382. Even when Loopy Toad wasn't at school, it had heard rumors about Dopey's various uncles. So the question now was, how many uncles did Dopey have? This was a very strange question. But from its current interaction with Weiji, Loopy Toad finally understood why Dopey-gua was able to keep his eyes and ears open, and why he knew so much gossip. Forget the other uncles, just the gossip he had gotten from Weiji was enough for Dopey-gua to use. A pet trainer was a freelance job that traveled all over the world and had a military background. Given this job and his special background, he naturally had a lot more information than ordinary people in this circle. There were a lot of big things that hadn't been officially announced, and this kind of person might have already gotten wind of them in their circle of friends. Dopey-gua wasn't in this circle, but his uncle was. Aren't you hungry? Seeing Loopy Toad stare blankly at the bag of dog food he had taken out, Weiji scratched his head a little awkwardly. Does Brother Dog usually not eat dog food? Loopy Toad didn't know how to answer. Because cultivating the Demon King Heart Sutra consumed a lot of physical strength, the energy provided by the dog food was in fact very important to Loopy Toad. It ate dog food, but the problem was that it wasn't ordinary dog food. Furthermore, after eating the fly-flavored dog food that Dopey-gua had given it, Loopy Toad realized that it couldn't eat any other kind of dog food. I'm not hungry yet. Loopy Toad broke out in a sweat, and then the expression on its dog face changed as if something bad had happened. What's wrong? Weiji looked at it. That group of people is here. Loopy Toad narrowed its eyes and wagged its tail as it looked in one direction. It had smelled the aura of the Bone Dragon Man, and was certain that the group of men in black who had been chasing it had already searched downstairs. Cultivators could disturb the spiritual senses and even create fake spiritual senses as a cover, but the aura was the only thing that could not be concealed. Unless all the pores on your body were sealed, Loopy Toad would be able to smell even the slightest hint of a scent. The Bone Dragon Man and a group of men in black had arrived downstairs at the family apartment building. Their car was parked in the alley where Weiji had abandoned it. It's here. The dog is inside. The skeletal dragon in the lead sneered. He had asked the skeletal dragon to follow the scent from the car to the apartment. Although the skeletal dragon's sense of smell was definitely worse than a dog's, a rank 3 skeletal dragon was still capable of distinguishing scents. This place doesn't look simple. Is it really okay to chase after it like this? I'm the leader of this operation. If anything happens, just push the blame to me. The Bone Dragon Man put his hands behind his back and looked at the tall building in front of him. This dog is definitely not simple. Back at the appraisal center, the dog had purposely released its aura to intimidate me. Also, my Bone Dragon told me that it has an abnormal undulation that doesn't belong to a spirit beast. If I can catch it and hand it over to the Society of Saints, it'll definitely fetch a good price. The Society of Saints will really accept them? Of course we can't kidnap people, but we can kidnap spirit beasts. There are still a lot of vacancies in the spirit beast class at the Society of Saints, and we urgently need all kinds of special spirit beasts. After we catch this guy, we'll feed it spirit water to make it forget its past memories, then we'll sell it. The Bone Dragon Man smiled. I believe the Society of Saints will give us a very generous reward. Without waiting for his subordinates to respond, the Bone Dragon Man had already stepped into the apartment building. About 2 minutes later, the man arrived at the door. "He's here." Behind the door, Wei Ji and Loopy Toad both held their breaths. Then, in the next moment, there was a deafening pounding on the door. "If you can hide and seek, then open the door." Loopy Toad, Wei Ji. A moment later, Wei Ji took the initiative to open the door. This door had been bought at a high price back then. In order to cater to the entire indoor ecological environment, it had been integrated with breathing and circulation technology. It could act as half an air freshener. But while it was expensive to build, it had one drawback: it was fragile. It couldn't withstand the repeated torment of a golden core cultivator. Wei Ji opened the door. In front of him, the men in black led by the Bone Dragon Man were still in the same unchanging formation. Cage, noose, taser. Wei Ji was shocked. "How did you get in?" Logically speaking, family apartments had always been off-limits to outsiders. The Bone Dragon Man crossed his arms and smiled as he took out a pack of cigarettes from his inner pocket. "I have this." Wei Ji was completely stupefied. This old smoker at the door had actually let people in for a pack of cigarettes. This was too immoral. "Kid, I don't know what your relationship with this dog is, but I advise you not to be a busybody. However, I advise you not to meddle in other people's business." The Bone Dragon male stared at Wei Ji. Wei Ji couldn't help laughing. "Unfortunately, I have true love for Brother Dog." Loopy Toad. When the men behind them heard Wei Ji's words, they couldn't help exclaiming, "Huh." Wei Ji took a deep breath, his expression very calm. He slowly put his hands behind his back and stared at the Bone Dragon Man in front of him. "Since you've already barged in here and are determined to make a move, does that mean you've already accepted the price you'll have to pay?" The Bone Dragon Man couldn't help laughing. "I'm not easily frightened. In our line of work, how bad can the outcome be? What's wrong with catching stray cats and dogs and then selling them for money? We're just riding on the Society of Saints trend to make some quick money." "I know. You're pet hunters." Wei Ji finally understood now that this group of people were the pet hunters who were now being severely boycotted by the pet trainers' world. However, pet hunters couldn't see the light of day, and usually chose to act at night. This was the first time even Wei Ji had seen such an arrogant activity in broad daylight. "Since you know who we are, there's no need to explain anymore." The Bone Dragon Man also took a stance. Pet trainers and pet hunters were enemies to begin with. Wei Ji shielded Loopy Toad behind him. Since pet hunters were involved in this matter, Wei Ji had to take action even if he didn't want to. "Brother Dog, just stand here and don't move." Loopy Toad. Wei Ji took a stance. "Let me test this guy first." As soon as he said that, the Bone Dragon Man actually made the first move, gaining the initiative by striking first. He was very fast, and Loopy Toad's line of sight was blocked by Wei Ji's body, so it couldn't see his movements clearly. By the time Loopy Toad changed its angle of view, it saw that the taser in the Bone Dragon Man's hand had already directly hit Wei Ji's body. Pah! Lightning flashed. There was the sound of an electric current. To the Bone Dragon Man's surprise, Wei Ji was actually unscathed. The Bone Dragon Man, "That's impossible. My taser magic treasure has 100,000 volts of electricity." Chapter 383. There were all kinds of strange constitutions in the cultivation world. For example, people with a poison constitution. Every strand of hair on their bodies was filled with poison, and they could easily injure or even kill people through skin contact. Flowers and trees would wither wherever they passed. Another example was people with a cold constitution. These people were born with extremely cold constitutions, and they didn't even feel the slightest thing when their bodies were being roasted by fire. However, this was the first time Loopy Toad had seen someone with a constitution like Wei Ji's, who wasn't afraid of being electrocuted. Looking at this scene, Loopy Toad pondered in its heart. Based on this alone, Wei Ji could be considered to have met the Society of Saints' exceptionally gifted recruitment requirements. This constitution was simply the bane of cultivators who used lightning-type spells. Loopy Toad just didn't know what the limit of Wei Ji's endurance was. If he could really be completely immune to lightning tribulations and not even fear them, that would be really awesome. Loopy Toad pondered in its heart. At that moment, the battle was still going on. Wei Ji gripped the taser and exerted a little force, and this magic treasure directly turned into a pile of powder with a bang. Wei Ji indeed had strength and he wasn't weak. Judging from his aura, he was only at the golden core stage, but Loopy Toad was sure that Wei Ji was definitely hiding his strength. On the way to the apartment earlier, that level of body movement wasn't something that a golden core cultivator could display. But his opponents were 5 golden core cultivators, so it actually wouldn't be easy for them to fight as a group. At that moment, it was purely a reflection of individual ability. Hiding behind Wei Ji, Loopy Toad was also ready to join the fight at any time. It looked at Wei Ji with a calm expression. Everyone attack. The Bone Dragon leader was exasperated. With a roar, the 5 of them took out their magic treasures and prepared to charge forward. At that moment, Wei Ji calmly looked at the time. We're almost there? Almost there? What did that mean? Before Loopy Toad could understand, the door to the fire escape on the 23rd floor opened with a hum at that moment, and an old man in a white tank top and bell-bottomed pants slowly walked out of the corridor with a flashlight in his hand. For a moment, the scene fell silent. After a brief silence, the old man looked at the men in black and frowned. How did you get in? The Bone Dragon leader stopped attacking and glanced at the red armband on the old man's arm. Neighborhood committee? He couldn't help but sneer. Old man, don't be nosy. The old man's expression was very calm. His body was very thin and he looked a little weak. However, at this time the old man raised his left arm. Suddenly, a domineering aura spread out from his body, and a dazzling saber light lit up. At this moment, the expressions of the 5 black-robed men changed greatly. It was as if they were not looking at a human's left arm, but a divine weapon that could destroy the world and split the heavens and earth. Loopy Toad's expression also changed dramatically. This old grandpa's identity wasn't simple, he was too strong. And it was ridiculously strong. The intense pressure caused everyone's skin to tremble. Under such a strong aura, Wei Ji scratched his head and said weakly, Uncle Jiang, please have mercy. I still have to interrogate these 5 people. The old man grunted softly, and the light on his left arm disappeared almost instantly. He turned his hand over and pressed it down. Like cockroaches, the 5 men were instantly stuck to the ground, unable to move at all. The ground sank slightly to form 5 human-shaped pits. The Bone Dragon leader was trembling all over. His eyes were bloodshot and his nose was dripping with blood. This place isn't a place where you can come and go as you please, the old man said in a low voice as he stared at the 5 black-robed men on the ground. Then he looked at Wei Ji. You calculated that I would come at this time, so you deliberately brought them to the apartment, right? How could I? Uncle Jiang. Wei Ji smiled awkwardly, his expression non-committal. Asking me to be your fighter, you've got guts? The old man snorted. Then, with a slight shake of his feet, a small wave of air rushed out and swept the 5 black-robed men away, opening up a path. Wei Ji, Uncle Jiang? The old man glared at Wei Ji. What are you standing there for? Get out of the way, I'm going in to read the water meter. The look made Wei Ji shiver. Okay, Uncle Jiang. When they entered, Uncle Jiang also saw Loopy Toad and he couldn't help raising his eyebrows. Did you raise this dog? Loopy Toad, Wei Ji, it's a friend's? Uncle Jiang stared at Loopy Toad for a while. Although Loopy Toad didn't feel any spiritual senses or aura sweep over it, the look in his eyes made all its fur stand on end. Too scary, just one look could be so intimidating. What's the saying again? Every now and then Uncle Jiang would say, ugly skins are all the same but interesting souls are 1 in a million. These words had a profound meaning, and Loopy Toad shuddered with fear and trepidation. This old man was really terrifying. What do you mean? Uncle Jiang? Wei Ji rubbed his head. Go figure it out yourself. But your friend's dog is indeed quite interesting. Uncle Jiang chuckled and went inside to read the water meter with his hands behind his back. It was obvious that this wasn't the old man's first time here, and he was clearly very familiar with the structure of Wei Ji's house. About 5 minutes later the old man came out of the kitchen. When he returned to the door, he found that Wei Ji had already tied up the 5 men in black. With his hands behind his back, the old man had a very relaxed expression on his face. I'll leave these 5 people to you to interrogate. I still have to go to the next house to read the water meter. Okay, Uncle Jiang. Have a safe trip, Uncle Jiang. Wei Ji saluted at the door and bowed. It wasn't until the old man left through the fire escape with his hands behind his back that Wei Ji heaved a huge sigh of relief. That was close. Uncle Jiang is still as good as ever. I almost fainted when I saw that aura just now. Wei Ji couldn't help sighing. The senior is? Loopy Toad was very curious. Have you heard of Jiang Lei? Wei Ji said. Loopy Toad was stunned. This was one of the 10 founding generals of Huaxiao Nation, like General Yi, Secretary Dakang and Minister Shi. That old man just now had actually been Marshal Jiang? Wei Ji, when the gate between worlds first opened back then, Uncle Jiang was very awe-inspiring. When the first Demon King fell, Uncle Jiang rushed up alone, and then used his scissor legs to crush the Demon King's head. Loopy Toad, Wei Ji, now Uncle Jiang, can be considered to have retired with honor. Also, the land for this family apartment is Uncle Jiang's, and it was Uncle Jiang who built this building himself back then. In modern terms, Uncle Jiang's current status should be building owner? Chapter 384. Of course, in addition to the retired Marshal Jiang, there were still a lot of other experts hidden in the family apartment. This was also why Wei Ji had chosen to buy the 23rd floor back then. Pet trainers were most afraid of these pet hunters, who would do anything to get a spirit beast they fancied. Wei Ji would at least feel more at ease if he could set up a base for cultivating soul pets in this family apartment. After Marshal Jiang left, Wei Ji looked at the 5 men tied up on the ground and sneered. All that was left was to interrogate them. He snapped his fingers. Instantly, the vines hanging from the ceiling in the main hall actually woke up as if they had a mind of their own. They dragged the group into the room and hung them from the ceiling one by one. They were actually plant spirit beasts? Loopy Toad was startled by this scene. It had thought that the vines on the ceiling were just decorations, and hadn't expected them to be alive. The plant spirit beasts in the spirit energy world were completely different from those in the gate between worlds. Furthermore, the aura they gave off was different from that of a normal spirit beast, so Loopy Toad couldn't react at all. Although it was currently at 3rd class, it still wasn't strong enough. If it could reach 2nd class or even 1st class, it would be a lot better than it was now. At the very least, its perception ability would be several levels higher than it was now. It had to speed up its cultivation of the Demon King Heart Sutra. This was what Loopy Toad thought in its heart. Inside the room, Wei Ji hung the men high from the ceiling. The Bone Dragon Man, who was the leader, had received the worst treatment as he hung upside down. Arms folded, he went over to the Bone Dragon Man and said, "Tell me, what organization are you from?" Wei Ji had already seen that these 5 people didn't have simple backgrounds. A pet hunter organization that dared to break into the family apartment had to be very powerful. Most of the people in this kind of organization relied on the power behind them to survive, and the more power they had, the more arrogant they were. Unfortunately, this group of people had probably chosen the wrong place today. The Bone Dragon Man smiled miserably and gritted his teeth, but didn't answer. His face was already flushed with blood, and he looked very uncomfortable. Loopy Toad knew that apart from absorbing spirit power molecules in the air through photosynthesis, this plant spirit beast actually had a more direct method, and that was to absorb energy from living things. Thus, the man felt exceptionally uncomfortable being hung upside down and having his spirit power sucked away bit by bit. I advise you to confess as soon as possible. Once a large illegal organization like yours is wiped out, it won't be a problem for you to be sentenced to a few hundred years. Wei Ji said faintly, "If you're willing to admit your crimes now and help us find your hideout, I can let you become a tainted witness and reduce your sentence in this incident. What do you think?" These words caused the group of men in black to break out in a cold sweat, especially the Bone Dragon Man. Fine beads of sweat had already appeared on his almost bloodshot face. He knew that Wei Ji wasn't joking. Based on the fact that the organization had captured several state-protected spirit beasts, it wouldn't be too much to sentence him to a few hundred years in prison. After all, in this day and age, people could be arrested and sentenced to 9 years in prison for stealing bird eggs. But Wei Ji also knew that his words were just a reminder, not a warning or a threat. Since they had already chosen to engage in this illegal business back then, both the Bone Dragon Man and the men in black behind him were well aware of the legal responsibility they had to bear. It was like how some celebrities clearly knew that taking drugs was wrong, but still insisted on doing so in search of so-called inspiration. Some live streamers were clearly very popular, but still insisted on using cheats to show off their skills. They knew they couldn't do it but still did it. It wasn't easy to get these people to give in. "I'll give you 5 minutes. This is your last chance." Wei Ji stared at the ancient dragon man with a very serious expression on his face. 5 minutes passed, and the Bone Dragon Man gritted his teeth and still refused to give in. Time's up. Wei Ji was right on time. He had already given the man a chance to repent and admit his guilt, but unfortunately the man didn't cherish it. "2 butterfly." At that moment Wei Ji called out softly, "Loopy Toad." Wei Ji grinned. "My pushing large butterfly actually never had a nickname, so I just gave it one. This name symbolizes the friendship between me and Brother Dog." Loopy Toad was startled. "You're actually called 2 butterfly? Why don't you call yourself 2 springs reflecting the moon?" Hearing Wei Ji's call, the pushing large butterfly that had been perched on the flower slowly flew over and scattered a pile of shiny powder on top of the Bone Dragon Man's head. "Loopy Toad, what's this?" Wei Ji replied, hallucinogenic powder. The Bone Dragon Man's face instantly turned unsightly. He hadn't expected Wei Ji to actually have this trick up his sleeve. I originally didn't want to use this trick. After all, the hallucinogenic powder's side effects aren't small. But I've already given him a chance. Wei Ji sighed. As he said this, Loopy Toad saw the Bone Dragon Man's pupils gradually begin to slacken as they were stained with a faint layer of red. This was a symptom of the hallucinogenic powder taking effect. Wei Ji stared at the man. What is your organization? The Bone Dragon Man replied, Demon Hunters Association. Wei Ji, how many core members are there? The Bone Dragon Man, hundreds of core cadres. Both Wei Ji and Loopy Toad were taken aback by this answer. Hundreds of core cadres? That organization had at least thousands, or even tens of thousands of members. Although pet trainers guilds from all over the country had worked with the police to crack down on a lot of illegal pet hunter organizations over the years, the largest number of people had been just over 100. Compared with this organization with hundreds of core cadres, they were just small fry. This time they had really caught a big fish. Elsewhere, Wang Ling looked at the time when he got home from school. It was already 5 o'clock in the evening, but Loopy Toad still hadn't come back. For some reason, Wang Ling's heart felt empty. Logically speaking, no matter how late the appraisal center was, the test would usually be done in 3 or 4 hours. Wang Ling knew that Loopy Toad had gone in the morning, and it was actually a little unusual for it to still not be back at this time. The old man looked at the time and was a little worried. Ling Ling? Did Loopy Toad get lost? When the old man watched TV, he had learned a lot about pet traffickers. In recent years in particular, the country's crackdown on them had intensified, leading to an endless stream of news about them. But even so, there were still people who took the risk out of desperation to do it. The old man looked a little worried. Those pet traffickers can even openly steal giant spirit beasts like gorillas. Loopy Toad is so weak and small, what if it really runs into danger? Wang Ling frowned at these words. Because he had signed a soul pet contract with Loopy Toad, he clearly knew that it was safe now. There was no way it would run into life-threatening danger. As for those soul pet traffickers that Grandfather Wang was talking about, Chapter 385. On Wei Ji's side, after the interrogation, he used the apartment phone to call his friend. This friend lived on the 17th floor of the apartment building, and could easily contact every resident in the apartment building using the cornet function available in every household in the building. It could be said that there was no gap between neighbors. But the fact that he could directly find someone through the apartment's cornet proved that Wei Ji and this friend of his had an extraordinary level of intimacy. About 3 minutes after the call was made, a burly man who was wrapped up very tightly and wore sunglasses came upstairs. Although his clothes were a little strange, he was very strong. After the man entered, he swept his eyes over the men in black who were tied up tightly, and a rough voice came through the man's mask. Just these few people? Thank you for the trouble. Wei Ji smiled. Then, the burly man tacitly tied the 5 of them together and directly dragged them away with a rope. Loopy Toad, this is? Wei Ji said, little gang. Loopy Toad, Wei Ji, I have a good brother, a retired captain of the criminal police force. He's still in touch with his old unit. It's definitely no problem for him to deal with this group of men. Loopy Toad, do you have a sister called Little Xia? Wei Ji was taken aback. How did you know? Loopy Toad, in a small district on the edge of Shanghai City, this was a small town that was almost neglected. This was where the Demon Hunters Association's base of operations was set up. When Wei Ji brought Loopy Toad here, the faint smell of blood permeated the air, and both man and dog couldn't help frowning. In order to prevent Loopy Toad from being exposed, Wei Ji changed into a large travel bag for Loopy Toad to hide in. Even though it was hiding in the leather smell of the bag, Loopy Toad could still smell the blood in the air. This was spirit beast blood, there was no doubt about it. This was just a small town, but the Demon Hunters Association had clearly made full use of it to become a true slaughterhouse for spirit beasts. After discussing it with Loopy Toad, Wei Ji's plan was to first sneak in and figure out what was going on, and then look for an opportunity to get rid of this group of people in one go. Wei Ji walked down the street with a large bag on his back. On the surface, the entire street looked very clean and tidy, without any signs of heresy. However, the smell in the air couldn't be concealed. Ordinary cultivators might not be able to smell it, but for a professional pet trainer like Wei Ji who was especially sensitive to auras, this smell was really too stimulating. Wei Ji walked to a random shop. This shop sold buns, but Wei Ji could tell that something was wrong with the meat in the buns. The shop owner was a fatty who weighed at least 150 kilograms. When he moved his body, the ground seemed to tremble. "This unfamiliar brother, do you want some buns?" The boss opened the steamer basket and looked at Wei Ji. Wei Ji pretended to be calm as he exhaled and said, "I have the goods." The boss glanced at Wei Ji. "The heavenly king covers the earth tiger. The pagoda suppresses the river demon." Wei Ji quickly replied. The boss said again, "Crispy skin roast duck is good." Wei Ji, "Sweet and sour pork." Loopy toad. This was a secret code of the Demon Hunters Association, which Wei Ji had specially asked during the interrogation. After matching the code, the fat boss then turned off the fire in the steamer basket and looked at Wei Ji with a smile on his face. He stood to one side and made an inviting gesture. "This brother, please come in." Following the boss's lead, Wei Ji felt that the smell of blood in the air was getting stronger and stronger. Through a secret passage in the bun shop, Wei Ji came to a hidden back street, and the scene in front of him was shocking. This was the true face of the town. The walls on both sides of the back street were piled high, and there were only a few pet dealers hawking their wares along both sides of the street. The entire street was filled with the stench of blood. Wei Ji could see a lot of cages made of black iron on the ground, which held all kinds of spirit beasts. Cats, dogs, foxes. Most of these spirit beasts had been captured by the Demon Hunters Association. Some of the spirit beasts even had collars on which their owners' names were engraved. Some of the spirit beasts locked in the iron cages were covered in cuts and bruises. They were already on the verge of death as they lay sprawled in the cages, gasping for breath. Seeing Wei Ji's expression, the boss didn't find it strange and smiled. "It looks like little brother hasn't been with the association for long, so it's no wonder. It's a miracle that most newcomers don't throw up every time they pass by this street. Do you see these seriously injured little guys?" The boss pointed to the injured spirit beasts locked in cages on the side of the road. "These guys are injured because they refused to break their contracts." Wei Ji didn't say anything and just listened as the boss went on. "Although there's a barrier here, the spirit beasts' contracts are cancelled when they're sent here because they're worried that their owners will find them." The boss chuckled. "But considering that some spirit beasts are extremely loyal and unwilling to cancel their contracts, they can only be forcibly cancelled. That's why they're seriously injured?" Wei Ji tried his best to make his voice sound less shaky. "Under normal circumstances, only spirit beasts that are on the verge of death can be easily broken by a third party." The boss spoke very casually. "Those with pure bloodlines will be treated. As for the ones with lower grades..." At this point, the boss turned his hand and pointed at the previous bun shop. "They're all sent to my shop." As he spoke, the boss of the bun shop led Wei Ji into the depths of the back street. Wei Ji found that the spirit beasts caught here were divided according to their grades. The spirit beasts at the end of the street weren't actually of high grades, but as they went deeper, Wei Ji found quite a few spirit beasts that were protected by the state. These spirit beasts were locked in exquisite cages. Their eyes were lifeless, as if they had been fed something like an obedience potion. They were completely obedient to the seller's requests. Finally, the boss stopped in front of a wooden house. "New brother, I've led you here. The person you're looking for is in this house." Wei Ji nodded and walked straight in with the big bag on his back. There weren't many people in the wooden house, but they all had the mark of the Demon Hunters Association on them. Judging from their auras alone, these people were probably core members of the Demon Hunters Association. This wasn't a formal trading place, but a tea room, which was probably specially used for business discussions. After looking around for a while, a man who looked to be in his 50s asked Wei Ji, "Little brother, are you here to buy or sell?" The man was wearing a black apron and had a cigarette in each of his ears. He looked like a butcher. "I want to sell a spirit dog." Wei Ji narrowed his eyes, found a place to sit down, and then put the large travel bag on his lap. This group of people had a very keen sense of smell. From the moment Wei Ji entered the door, their eyes had been glued to the travel bag. "What breed?" "Akita." Wei Ji opened the travel bag and directly lifted Loopy Toad's fat face. It felt so good. "Akita?" This group of people was blank when they heard this because they all knew that Akitas weren't spirit dogs. A moment later, the uncle who looked like a butcher spoke again as he stared at Loopy Toad. "Is this a hybrid?" "Wei Ji, Loopy Toad, you..." "What?" The uncle was shocked. "And it's only from Dong Bay?" Chapter 386. This dog can actually talk? Just like everyone else who had heard Loopy Toad speak, the group of people in the room also had astonished looks on their faces. "Uncle Zwa? Is this dog at second class?" A very thin young man lit a cigarette for the butcher uncle. The uncle immediately shook his head. "This dog definitely isn't at second class." Wei Ji and Loopy Toad scanned everyone's strength. This butcher uncle was only at the middle golden core stage, but it was very clear that realm didn't mean everything in the Demon Hunters Association. This butcher uncle, who was called Uncle Zwa, was clearly an old member of the association and had some experience in appraising spirit beasts. Uncle Zwa stared at Loopy Toad and reached out to stroke its fur, which made Loopy Toad feel sick. Although normal spirit beasts don't have the ability to speak until they reach second class, it's clear that this dog is very special. Uncle Zwa smiled and blew out a ring of smoke as he stared at Wei Ji. "Little brother, where did you get this dog?" Wei Ji rubbed his head. "I captured it from a friend. He's a good person, his family runs an inn. He has a collection of many exotic species. The first time I saw this dog, I knew it wasn't an ordinary dog, so I wanted to get it." Strong Zwa, "It didn't resist?" Wei Ji, "It's mentally retarded." Loopy Toad took a deep breath. "I see." This Uncle Zwa sneered. "You actually started with a friend. This little brother looks like you have a bright future ahead of you." "You flatter me." Wei Ji faked a smile. "I'm the appraisal manager here. If you're willing to sell it, then name a price." Strong Zwa had a cigarette in his mouth, his expression carefree. "This dog of mine is very special." Wei Ji smiled. "I want to meet the higher-ups here before I make a decision." The young men on the side were clearly very dissatisfied with Wei Ji's attitude, but this Uncle Zwa held out his hand to stop them. "Hehehe, among all the newcomers who trade with our Demon Hunters Association, it's really rare for you to say that you want to meet the higher-ups on your first transaction. Although it's indeed rare for this dog of yours to be able to speak before it's at second class, its level actually isn't very high. Even if our president meets it, he won't ask for a particularly high price. What's more, the guild leader usually doesn't meet newcomers easily." At this point, Strong Zwa's eyes narrowed slightly. "But it doesn't matter anymore." "What do you mean?" Suddenly Wei Ji frowned. He felt a trace of killing intent. Strong Zwa crossed his arms and said with a smile, "In our Demon Hunters Association, even if we can't agree on the price, there's no room for bargaining." Wei Ji's eyes twitched. "You want to rob us?" "Young man, this is your first time trading with my Demon Hunters Association, so you don't know the dangers of society. If you will leave the dog, everybody will be happy. If you're unwilling, you'll have to suffer some physical pain." After Strong Zwa finished speaking, he couldn't help but add, "This is a society ruled by law. It's not good to kill people." Loopy Toad. Wei Ji. Wei Ji and Loopy Toad were stunned when they heard this. A bunch of pet dealers who broke the law were actually talking about the law here? "Looks like I can only fight." Wei Ji sighed in his heart. He hadn't expected things to come to this in the end. He had originally wanted to wait until the highest level here was revealed before making a move, but he had overlooked one point, and that was that from the very beginning, this bunch of pet dealers who broke the law wouldn't talk to him nicely at all. "Do we have a chance of winning?" Loopy Toad asked telepathically. It had already jumped out of its travel bag and was staring at the people around it. There were 12 people in total here. Strong Zwa, who was their leader, didn't have a high realm, but the people under him were very troublesome. 4 of them were at the peak late golden core stage. "What, you want to fight?" Strong Zwa stared at Wei Ji and sneered. "Our Demon Hunters Association doesn't lack people. The 12 of us can be considered experts in the association. If you want to fight here, you won't be able to get away with it." "It's fine." Wei Ji waved his hand lightly. "I originally wanted to wait for your president to come out, and then get rid of you all in one go. It's just 12 golden core cultivators." Seeing this, Loopy Toad felt reassured. This Wei Ji was indeed an expert. After all, the body technique he had displayed back then didn't belong to this realm at all, and his aura was unfathomable. He was definitely someone who had hidden his realm. To be so calm in the face of 12 golden core cultivators, it was clear that he was very confident in his realm. At this point, Strong Zwa began to realize that Wei Ji's identity wasn't simple, and he stared at him with a burning gaze. "Who on earth are you?" At this point, Wei Ji had nothing to hide, and simply took out his pet trainer medal. "Pet trainer?" Everyone in the room was shocked. Strong Zwa stared at Wei Ji and grit his teeth. "You're a spy?" Wei Ji fiddled with his cap and chuckled. "When I entered the back street just now, I already sent out the coordinates of this place. I believe a large number of police will be here soon." Hearing this, Strong Zwa and the others were already gloomy and couldn't take it anymore. "Catch them." "Brat, since you're courting death, don't blame us." "Reckless thing." Instantly, 3 golden core cultivators stretched out their hands at the same time to press down on Wei Ji. This was the grappling hand, which wasn't a high-level technique, but with 3 golden core cultivators attacking at the same time, The wind pressure and power created were extraordinary. The three people flanked Wei Ji from different directions, and the grappling hand formed a solid triangular shackle in the air. Once someone of the same realm was restrained, it would be very difficult for them to break free. Loopy Toad knew that now was the time for Wei Ji to show his true strength. Insignificant skill. Wei Ji snorted, and his familiar body technique appeared in front of Loopy Toad once again. The instant the three people flanked him, he slid at a strange angle to avoid them. Good positioning. On the side, Loopy Toad couldn't help sighing at this scene. But gradually Loopy Toad noticed a clue. It realized that Wei Ji seemed to be dodging all this time, and didn't really intend to make a move. What was going on? Was he still not going to make a move? Although positioning was indeed very flashy, it was impossible to rely on positioning alone to win in a fight. Just as Loopy Toad was wondering what Wei Ji was going to do next, it saw Wei Ji dodge their attacks and cry for help. Brother dog, why are you just watching? Help me. Loopy Toad. Wei Ji transmitted his voice anxiously. Positioning is my only skill. Loopy Toad. Chapter 387. At that moment, Loopy Toad had no choice but to admit a tragic fact. There really were cultivators in this world who cultivated body movements as their main cultivation method. Because in most cases, body movements were just a secondary cultivation option. After all this time, all you can do is hide. Wei Ji explained, pet trainers rely on their soul pets to fight, and the most important thing for a master is to protect himself while commanding the battle. Thus my family taught me from a young age to play it safe. As long as I can hide well, there's no boss that can't be taken down. Loopy Toad was stunned. This sounded a little nonsensical, but when it thought about it carefully, it did make some sense. Loopy Toad, then did you bring your soul pet? Wei Ji, no. Loopy Toad, as Wei Ji dodged the technique, he grinned confidently. Don't I still have you? Loopy Toad, this was also AF*** King Swindler. Just like that, all of a sudden, Loopy Toad found that the burden of this battle had fallen entirely on its shoulders. Although the space inside the wooden hut was big enough, using body movements to dodge continuously like Wei Ji wasn't a long-term solution. In the end, his physical strength and spirit energy would run out. Set up the array. Strong's was shouted softly as he retreated behind a group of people. His hands formed a magic seal and a large amount of spirit power swept up, causing the whole hut to tremble. The shockwave shook the walls of the wooden house, causing some cracks to appear. The effect of the suppression array set up by 12 golden core cultivators working together was naturally extraordinary. Spirit power roared, and the ear-piercing sound waves produced by the intense vibrations in the air made people's hearts go numb. It was like a big cat scratching a blackboard with its claws, and it was extremely uncomfortable. You can't escape. We 12 golden core cultivators have joined hands to suppress you. It's absolutely impossible for you to escape when you're at the same realm. Strong's was shouted sternly. As he pressed down with both hands, he saw that the man and dog in front of him were completely immobilized as they were trapped in the array. Wei Ji broke out in a cold sweat. Body movements were completely useless in the face of such a powerful suppressive array. Loopy Toad narrowed its eyes. Given the current situation where they lacked the advantage in numbers and the disparity in combat strength, there was only one way left. In the last clause of the soul pet contract, there was an additional option. The master could use the power of the contract to cast a support spell on the battle pet. As long as the power of the contract existed, the battle pet could be long-range regardless of distance. This was the trump card that Loopy Toad had thought of from the very beginning, but it didn't want to use it. As a demon king, Loopy Toad had the arrogance of a demon king. Loopy Toad had initially thought that Wei Ji was strong enough to wipe out this group of golden core cultivators, but it turned out that it had been thinking too much. At that moment, everyone thought the outcome was a foregone conclusion. Strong's was sneered as he stared at Loopy Toad. Your fur may look strange, but your flesh is very sturdy. If we make you into buns later, they might taste very good. Inside the array, Wei Ji seemed to be completely suppressed, but in fact that wasn't the case. As a professional pet trainer, self-preservation was the most important thing, and it wasn't that he didn't have a way to escape. But Wei Ji wanted to know what was truly strange about Loopy Toad. Then, to everyone's surprise, Loopy Toad suddenly raised its dog head with a mocking expression. Do you really think I can't beat you? The 12 golden core cultivators looked at each other, stunned. It was just a mongrel spirit dog with a body full of green fur and shouting in front of everyone. Just thinking about this scene was comical. Behind them, Strong's was stared at Loopy Toad for a few seconds before he couldn't help laughing. You're just a spirit dog that hasn't even reached second class. What right do you have to challenge me here? As a pet, it only needs to be enslaved. Loopy Toad also laughed. You want to enslave this king? I'm afraid you're not qualified enough. If you have the ability, give me 30 seconds. I'll beat all your teeth out. What did you say? Loopy Toad narrowed its eyes. I said, give me 30 seconds. I'm a man, no a dog. I'll beat the crap out of you. Such a shocking statement instantly silenced everyone in the wooden hut for a long time, and even the air seemed to freeze. Only Wei Ji had a pleasantly surprised expression on his face. 30 seconds? What on earth could it do? Strong's was snorted coldly. Fine. I'll give you 30 seconds, let's see what you can do. Loopy Toad was delighted at this answer because it took time to communicate with Wang Ling through the contract, and during this time, there couldn't be any outside interference. The most important thing was that only 30 seconds was enough. It had anticipated that the people of the Demon Hunters Association would view spirit beasts as commodities and weeds, which was why it had tried to buy time with such an arrogant attitude. Who would have thought that it would really fall into its trap? 30 seconds. As long as 30 seconds passed, this bunch of people were done for. At this point, the scene fell into silence. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen in 30 seconds. When the second hand moved exactly past 30 seconds, Yi Zichen was stunned. There was a roar in the sky. All of a sudden, it was as if a divine light was pouring down from beyond the heavens. It directly penetrated the ceiling of the wooden hut and fell on Loopy Toad. What was that? The 12 golden core cultivators in the wooden hut, led by Strong Zhuo, were astonished, and they subconsciously felt puzzled. At that moment, boundless rune light swirled around Loopy Toad's body, and even its feet glowed with a dazzling brilliance. Loopy Toad's aura also skyrocketed with this buff spirit light. It didn't move a single step, it merely wagged its tail and invisible spirit power was released. Then everyone heard the sound of something shattering. Strong Zhuo turned pale with fright, because this shattering sound was none other than the magic array that the 12 golden core cultivators had set up together. It had actually shattered under the impact of this invisible spirit power. Uncle Zhuo? What's this? A support spell. This dog used the power of the contract to make its owner cast a support spell on itself. How many spells are there in total? Strong Zhuo narrowed his eyes and stared cautiously at Loopy Toad. Judging from the type of light, there should be no less than 40 spells. No less than 40? These people turned pale with fright. Don't panic, this is just a buff spell and it only lasts for a short time. We just need to hang on for a while, said Strong Zhuo. Hang on for a while? Loopy Toad couldn't help laughing when it heard this. The duration of buff spells depended on the level of the spell. Low-level buff spells naturally lasted for a short time, but the point was that little Master Ling had personally cast these spells. A total of 49 buff spells. Each one was at the highest level. Loopy Toad snorted coldly in its heart. You're finished? The current me.